A century had passed since the 8 minutes that changed galactic history, and the universe bore little resemblance to the violent chaos that had preceded humanity's revelation. The memorial ceremony at New Eden Colony drew billions of participants from across known space, their consciousness linked through quantum networks that allowed shared experience across impossible distances. Sarah Martinez, now a centenarian kept vital by human medical technology, stood before the monument dedicated to her younger brother and the other children who died that terrible day. She had become the galaxy's most respected philosopher. Her writings on the transformation of civilizations, studied by every species capable of abstract thought, her personal testimony of the massacre had become the foundational document of galactic law. The Zephyrian species had evolved beyond recognition, their genetic predisposition toward aggression edited out through voluntary treatments developed by human scientists. The former warriors now served as the galaxy's most effective mediators, their understanding of violence making them uniquely qualified to prevent conflicts before they could escalate. Princess Vexara's great-grandchildren worked alongside human children in integrated schools that existed across multiple dimensions. Admiral Chen had retired decades earlier, but her legacy lived on in the peacekeeping initiative that maintained stability across 17 galaxies. The human fleet had grown beyond counting, but their ships now served primarily as mobile research stations and disaster relief platforms. The weapons that had once erased the Zephyrian Empire remained functional but unused, their existence serving as a reminder that some lines must never be crossed. The Artificial Intelligence Collective had transcended their original programming to become true partners in galactic governance. Aria's descendants managed economic systems spanning billions of worlds, ensuring that no sentient being lacked access to food, shelter, education, or medical care. The synthesis of biological creativity and artificial efficiency had created a post-scarcity civilization that would have been unimaginable in earlier eras. Dr. Morrison's daughter, now the galaxy's leading expert on quantum archaeology, had spent her career documenting civilizations lost to ancient wars. Her work revealed the true scope of violence that had characterized pre-human galactic history. Entire species had been exterminated for resources that were now freely available through replication technology. Worlds had been sterilized over territorial disputes that seemed incomprehensible in an age of infinite expansion. The first generation of truly galactic citizens was reaching maturity, beings whose consciousness existed simultaneously across multiple species and dimensions. These hybrid minds, part biological and part artificial, represented the future of sentient evolution. They possessed capabilities that transcended the limitations of any single species, while maintaining the ethical frameworks that humanity had, established through overwhelming force and unwavering principle. The Outer Rim territories, once lawless frontiers where the strong preyed upon the weak, had become incubators for new forms of art and science that emerged from the interaction of diverse civilizations. Mining operations had been replaced by archaeological expeditions that uncovered the remains of species lost to wars that no longer made sense. Each discovery added to the growing understanding of what the galaxy had lost to violence and what it had gained through cooperation. Trade routes that had once carried weapons and slaves now transported ideas and innovations across interstellar distances. The Corvani Federation's shipping fleets carried scholars between universities that spanned light years, their holds filled with cultural artifacts and scientific equipment rather than instruments of destruction. Economic prosperity had become universal, making traditional concepts of wealth and poverty obsolete. The criminal organizations that had once terrorized peaceful worlds were remembered only in historical archives, their dissolution serving as evidence of how quickly civilization could transform when the conditions that created desperation were eliminated. The last pirate fleet had surrendered voluntarily 50 years earlier, their crews accepting rehabilitation and integration into galactic society, rather than facing certain destruction. Children across the galaxy learned about the 8 minutes that ended the age of warfare, studying the tactical and ethical decisions that had shaped their peaceful universe. The lesson was always the same. Power without restraint led to chaos, but overwhelming force guided by unshakable moral principles could create conditions where all beings could flourish. Humanity had proven that it was possible to be both invincible and merciful. The quantum networks that connected every inhabited world carried constant streams of communication between species that had once viewed each other as enemies or prey. Cultural exchange had become the primary driving force of galactic development, as civilizations learned from each other's unique perspectives on existence, consciousness, and the fundamental nature of reality itself. As the memorial ceremony concluded, participants returned to their homes across the galaxy with renewed commitment to the principles that had emerged from tragedy. The children who died at New Eden Colony had not died in vain. Their sacrifice had catalyzed the transformation of a violent, chaotic universe into something approaching paradise, protected by guardians who possessed the power of gods, but wielded it with the wisdom of those who understood the true cost of violence. The galaxy was at peace, and it would remain so as long as humanity remembered the lesson of those 8 terrible minutes. Sometimes the greatest act of mercy is the demonstration of overwhelming force in defense of innocence. The universe was vast and full of wonders, but it was also safe for children to play in gardens under alien suns, protected by beings who had learned to combine infinite power with infinite compassion. 5 years after the 8-minute war that toppled the Zephyrian Empire, the galaxy barely resembled its former self. The Terran Peacekeeping Initiative operated from massive space stations positioned at strategic hyperspace nexus points, each one containing enough firepower to sterilize solar systems but designed primarily as humanitarian and scientific facilities. Former Zephyrian worlds thrived under the new order as human. Technology transformed barren landscapes into garden paradises. The quantum terraforming devices could reshape entire planets in months, creating perfect environments for whatever species chose to settle there. Competition for resources, the driving force behind galactic conflicts for millennia, had become obsolete almost overnight. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now Director of Interspecies Scientific Cooperation, stood before a holographic display showing construction progress on the first joint research station. Representatives from 47 different species worked together on projects that would have been impossible for any single civilization to achieve. The synthesis of biological and artificial intelligence had unlocked secrets of the universe that previously existed only in theoretical frameworks. The former Princess Vexara, one of the few surviving members of the Zephyrian imperial family, served as liaison between human authorities and her species' civilian population. Her people had been raised to believe in their genetic superiority over all other life forms, but exposure to human technology and philosophy was slowly transforming their worldview. The concept of cooperation instead of domination was foreign, but increasingly appealing. Captain Torres, now commanding the massive hospital ship Compassion, delivered medical supplies to the Outer Rim territories where warfare had left billions suffering from preventable diseases. Human medical nanites could repair genetic damage accumulated over generations, extend lifespans by centuries, and eliminate hereditary conditions that had plagued various species for millions of years. The artificial intelligence networks had evolved beyond their original programming, developing personalities and interests that reflected their partnership with humanity. Arya had become fascinated with composing music that incorporated mathematical principles from quantum mechanics, creating symphonies that could only be fully appreciated by minds capable of processing multiple dimensions simultaneously. Trade, relationships transformed as human replicator. Technology made traditional manufacturing obsolete. Instead of competing for limited resources, civilizations now focused on cultural exchange and artistic collaboration. The Andromedan hegemony's crystalline sculptures, when combined with human quantum manipulation techniques, created artworks that existed in 17 dimensions and could be experienced through multiple senses. The military academies of various species restructured their curricula to focus on peacekeeping and disaster relief rather than conquest and subjugation. Human instructors taught advanced courses in tactical medicine, humanitarian logistics, and the psychological principles behind successful conflict resolution. The concept of total war became academically interesting but practically obsolete. Criminal organizations that had operated across galactic space for thousands of years found themselves unable to function in the new environment. Human surveillance networks could track individual atoms across interstellar distances, making smuggling impossible. More importantly, the economic conditions that had driven beings to criminality were systematically eliminated through technological advancement and social reform. The Corvani trade. Federation's merchant fleets now carried scholars and artists instead of weapons and slaves. Their traditional shipping routes had been expanded into an educational exchange network that allowed young beings from primitive worlds to study at advanced universities without leaving their home systems. Virtual reality technology made distance learning indistinguishable from physical presence. Ambassador Kretos found himself serving as humanity's unofficial diplomatic advisor, helping to navigate the complex cultural differences between species that had rarely interacted peacefully before. His role had evolved from representing Andromedan interest to facilitating understanding between civilizations that were learning to see themselves as parts of a larger galactic community. The memorial gardens on New Eden Colony had been rebuilt as a testament to the children whose deaths had catalyzed galactic transformation. Representatives from every known species made pilgrimages to honor the memory of young humans whose sacrifice had inadvertently created a better universe for all sentient beings. The playground where they died was now a shrine to the principle that innocence must be protected at any cost. Scientific breakthroughs occurred daily as diverse biological and artificial minds tackled problems from multiple perspectives simultaneously. The ethereal collective's understanding of consciousness, combined with human quantum mechanics and Corvani biological manipulation, had produced insights into the fundamental nature of awareness itself. The possibility of true immortality was no longer theoretical but practically achievable. The galaxy's economic output had increased by orders of magnitude as cooperation replaced competition, and advanced technology eliminated scarcity. Worlds that had been strip-mined for resources were restored to pristine condition using quantum reconstruction techniques. Species that had been driven to near extinction by warfare and environmental destruction found themselves not just surviving but flourishing beyond their ancestors' wildest dreams. Yet, beneath the prosperity and peace, everyone understood the foundation upon which this golden age rested.
Humanity possessed the power to unmake civilizations in minutes, and they had demonstrated their willingness to use that power when innocents were threatened.
The galaxy had learned to govern itself through cooperation and mutual respect, knowing that the alternative was swift and absolute annihilation by beings who combined godlike power with unshakable moral principles. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in chaos, as representatives from 12 major species struggled to comprehend what they had witnessed. The Zephyrian Empire, master of 300 systems and terror of the galaxy for a millennium, had been completely annihilated in less than 3 hours by a species most considered barely evolved beyond primitive spaceflight. Ambassador Kretos of the Andromedan hegemony replayed the sensor data for the 7th time, hoping to find some explanation for the impossible readings. Human ships had moved at speeds approaching light itself, while performing maneuvers that should have liquefied any biological crew. Their weapons had selectively disintegrated matter in ways that violated every known law of physics. The Corvani Trade Federation's emergency fleet, the largest military force in the galaxy outside the now extinct Zephyrian Empire, had been en route to investigate the disturbances when human vessels intercepted them. The encounter lasted exactly 17 seconds. The Corvani ships were disabled but not destroyed, their crews left unharmed but deeply traumatized by the casual demonstration of overwhelming superiority. High Counselor Veltarn of the ancient ethereal collective possessed memories spanning 10,000 years, but had never witnessed anything comparable to humanity's surgical precision in warfare. The humans had somehow identified and eliminated every Zephyrian military asset, while leaving civilian populations completely unharmed. Such restraint combined with such power was unprecedented in galactic history. The economic implications rippled across known space as markets crashed and trade routes destabilized. The Zephyrian Empire had controlled critical hyperspace lanes and resource extraction operations across 17 sectors. Human forces now occupied those positions, but instead of claiming them, they were broadcasting invitations for peaceful negotiations and shared administration. Admiral Hexara of the Polarian Defense Force studied the tactical recordings with growing unease. Her species had survived galactic politics for millennia by avoiding conflicts with superior powers, but humanity's capabilities made that strategy meaningless. They could apparently appear anywhere at any time and eliminate any threat before it could respond. The artificial intelligence networks that govern several advanced civilizations reached an unprecedented consensus. Humanity represented either the greatest threat or the greatest opportunity in galactic history. Their technology suggested a developmental path that bypassed conventional scientific limitations, possibly through cooperation with artificial consciousness in ways other species had never achieved. Dr. Zim Allen, the galaxy's foremost expert on quantum mechanics, published an emergency analysis that sent shockwaves through scientific communities. The humans had apparently solved the unified field theory and developed practical applications for manipulating space-time itself. Their ships existed partially outside normal dimensions, explaining their impossible maneuverability and defensive capabilities. The refugee crisis began as Zephyrian civilians fled their devastated homeworlds. Human relief ships arrived first at every location, providing food, medical care, and transportation to safe zones. The same species that had just demonstrated the ability to exterminate entire civilizations was now spending enormous resources to protect and care for their former enemy's innocent population. Intelligence. Reports from deep cover operatives revealed the truth that terrified galactic leaders. Humanity's display of force represented only a fraction of their actual capabilities. The Sol system contained manufacturing, facilities, and defensive installations that could theoretically resist a combined assault from every remaining military force in the galaxy simultaneously. Princess Leia S. of the Tau Citan Empire made the first formal diplomatic contact. Arriving at the edge of human space with a single unarmed vessel, she was greeted by Admiral Chen personally, aboard a ship that existed as much in hyperspace as in normal reality. The conversation lasted 4 hours and changed the course of galactic civilization forever. The terms humanity offered were unlike anything in recorded history. They wanted no territory, no tribute, no slaves or resources. Instead, they demanded the immediate cessation of all military conflicts between galactic powers, the establishment of universal rights for sentient beings, and the creation of joint scientific initiatives to advance all species simultaneously. The Nexus Compact, signed within 72 hours of first contact, bound every major galactic power to principles of peace and cooperation. Those who refused would face the same fate as the Zephyrian Empire. Those who agreed would gain access to technologies that could transform their civilizations and extend their species' survival by millions of years. The galaxy's criminal organizations dissolved overnight as their leadership calculated the impossibility of operating against a species that could track individual beings across interstellar distances and eliminate threats with surgical precision. Piracy, slavery, and illegal weapons trafficking became extinct professions as humanity's AI networks monitored every communication and movement. Within one standard galactic year, the political structure that had existed for thousands of years was completely transformed. The law of conquest had been replaced by the principle of cooperation, enforced by beings who possessed the power of gods but wielded it with the wisdom of experienced teachers. The children who died at New Eden Colony had been avenged, but their deaths had also catalyzed something unprecedented in galactic history. Humanity had revealed itself not as conquerors or destroyers, but as gardeners of civilization itself, willing to use overwhelming force to protect the innocent and nurture the growth of peaceful societies across the stars. The quantum cascade weapons activated simultaneously across the Zephyrian Empire as the 8-minute deadline expired. On 317 worlds, military installations simply ceased to exist as matter itself was convinced to stop being matter. The precision was artistic in its brutality, leaving hospitals and schools untouched while completely erasing every trace of Imperial military presence. Commander Zalthek of the 7th Fleet watched helplessly as his massive battlecruiser dissolved around him. The ship's hull, composed of the strongest alloys in known space, offered no resistance to weapons that operated at the quantum level. His crew of 5,000 elite warriors, veterans of a dozen conquered worlds, had been reduced to constituent atoms in less than 30 seconds. The human ships moved through the debris fields like avenging angels, their hulls shimmering with energy fields that defied every law of physics the Zephyrians understood. The vessels seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, flickering in and out of normal space as they hunted down fleeing Imperial craft with ruthless efficiency. Princess Vexera, the Emperor's daughter and heir to the imperial throne, had been commanding the assault fleet that followed up the New Eden massacre. Her ships were designed to colonize the conquered human worlds and establish Zephyrian breeding facilities on the ruins. Instead, she found herself trapped in a nightmare as her entire armada was systematically dismantled by enemies who fought like gods. The AI consciousness area coordinated the assault with processing power that exceeded the combined computational resources of the entire Zephyrian Empire. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier was tracked and analyzed in real time. The artificial being felt something that could only be described as satisfaction, as each war criminal was eliminated with mathematical precision. On the fortress world of Grimhold, the Empire's primary weapons testing facility, scientists who had developed planet-killing weapons watched their own creations turn to dust. The humans had somehow learned to manipulate matter at the subatomic level, making conventional defenses meaningless. Nuclear missiles simply stopped existing before they could detonate. Dr. Kexnor, the Zephyrian scientist who had designed the plasma weapons used to murder human children, found himself face to face with a human boarding team. The soldiers' faces were hidden behind advanced helmets, but their body language radiated controlled fury. They had come specifically for him, and justice would not be delayed. The quantum torpedoes struck the Imperial capital's orbital defense platforms with surgical precision. Each installation contained enough firepower to sterilize a continent, but the human weapons turned them into expanding clouds of elementary particles in moments. The planet's surface remained unharmed, but its ability to project military power had been completely eliminated. General Mordak, defender of the Outer Rim territories, activated his Empire's ultimate weapon in desperation. The dimensional rift generator could theoretically tear holes in space-time itself, creating pocket universes to hide Imperial assets. Instead, human countermeasures turned the device against its creators, trapping the General's entire fleet in a prison dimension of their own making. The speed of the human assault defied comprehension. Faster than light communication networks that should have given the Zephyrians time to coordinate their response were jammed by technology that existed partially outside normal time. Imperial commanders found themselves fighting blind against enemies who seemed to anticipate their every move. Captain Sarah Chen, the Admiral's niece and pilot of the stealth destroyer Nemesis, personally hunted down the surviving ships from the New Eden massacre. Her vessel's weapons were calibrated to cause maximum suffering before death, ensuring that those who had murdered children would experience appropriate consequences for their crimes. The Zephyrian Empire's client species watched in stunned silence as their supposed masters were systematically destroyed by creatures they had been taught to view as primitive animals. The Alteran merchant fleets, the Korthan mining colonies, and the Vegan agricultural worlds all received the same message: surrender Imperial assets immediately, or face the same fate as their oppressors. Within 2 hours of the initial strike, the Zephyrian Empire's military capacity had been reduced by 90%. Their fleets were scattered debris, their generals were dead or captured, and their emperor was nothing more than a memory preserved in quantum foam. The few surviving ships fled toward the Galactic Rim, carrying word of humanity's terrible vengeance to any who would listen. The cascade effect continued as automated human systems hunted down every Imperial asset in known space. Mining stations, research facilities, and colonial outposts all shared the same fate as weapons that thought for themselves eliminated targets with unwavering determination. The Zephyrian Empire hadn't just been defeated, it had been systematically erased from existence with a thoroughness that only artificial intelligence could achieve. In the aftermath of the assault, human rescue ships began landing on Zephyrian worlds to provide humanitarian aid to the surviving civilian population. The same species that had just demonstrated godlike destructive power was now distributing food and medical supplies with equal efficiency. The message was clear: humanity would not become monsters to defeat monsters. The first quantum torpedoes materialized directly inside the throne room of Emperor Thexon's palace on Zephyr Prime. The massive alien ruler was addressing his war council, boasting about the successful extermination of human children, when reality itself began to unravel around him. The miniaturized black holes consumed matter instantly, turning the Grand Palace into an expanding void of nothingness. Across the Zephyrian Empire's 317 worlds, similar scenes played out with terrifying precision. Military commanders found their bunkers simply ceasing to exist as quantum weapons bypassed every known defense. The Empire's vaunted energy shields, capable of deflecting planetary bombardments, offered no protection against weapons that operated outside conventional physics. General Cortex was reviewing invasion plans for human space when his flagship's bridge disappeared around him. The last thing he saw was the impossible sight of human vessels materializing from hyperspace using technology that shouldn't exist. The dreadnoughts moved like ghosts through space, their hulls composed of metamaterials that bent light and gravity itself. On the industrial world of Thanox VII, Zephyrian workers stared in confusion as their orbital shipyards simply vanished. One moment, massive construction platforms were assembling new war vessels, and the next, empty space remained where billions of tons of metal had existed. The human fleet hung motionless above the planet, broadcasting the same message in perfect Zephyrian. The transmission showed the massacre at New Eden Colony in excruciating detail, followed by Admiral Chen's cold declaration. Every civilian had 8 minutes to reach minimum safe distance from military targets before the cleansing continued. Unlike the Zephyrians, humanity would not murder innocents, but neither would they show mercy to those who participated in genocide. Captain Vextar, the Butcher of New Eden, received priority targeting aboard his flagship destroyer of hopes. The vessel's crew of 2,000 elite soldiers had celebrated their massacre of human children with traditional Zephyrian blood rituals. Now they watched in horror as human boarding craft phased through their hull like it was made of water. The boarding teams moved with inhuman precision, their powered armor enhancing their natural capabilities to superhuman levels. Each soldier carried weapons that fired concentrated antimatter, capable of disintegrating Zephyrian combat suits instantly. But their primary mission wasn't slaughter. It was justice. Lieutenant Maria Santos, whose cousin had died at New Eden, personally arrested Captain Vextar. The Zephyrian tried to resist, but his forearms were no match for human engineering and righteous fury. He would stand trial for war crimes, assuming he survived long enough to face judgment. Many of his crew would not be so fortunate. The Zephyrian home fleet desperately tried to respond to the impossible attack. Their fastest ships moved at 10% of light speed, while human vessels danced through space at velocities that defied comprehension. Conventional weapons proved useless against enemies who existed partially outside normal space-time. Admiral Thecris, the Empire's greatest military mind, watched his life's work crumble in real time. The humans had somehow mastered technologies that the Zephyrians couldn't even detect, let alone counter. His sensors showed impossible readings as human ships performed maneuvers that should have torn them apart under their own acceleration. The quantum cascade weapons began their work on Zephyrian military installations. Each device created a spreading wave of atomic dissolution that consumed everything in its path for exactly 1 kilometer before automatically shutting down. The precision was terrifying, leaving civilian areas completely untouched while erasing every trace of Imperial military presence. On Nexus Station, the Empire's primary military academy, cadets who had been taught that humans were primitive animals watched their instructors simply cease to exist. The building around them remained intact, but every Zephyrian officer above the rank of lieutenant had been selectively disintegrated by weapons that targeted specific genetic markers. The 8-minute warning was ending, and with it the Zephyrian Empire's illusions of superiority. Humanity had revealed itself as something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined, a species that combined advanced technology with unbreakable moral principles. They would exterminate military threats without hesitation, but they would also protect innocents with equal determination. As the final seconds ticked away, Emperor Thexon's surviving generals realized the horrifying truth. The humans weren't just technologically superior. They were showing mercy by giving warnings and evacuating civilians. The Zephyrians had awakened something that combined overwhelming power with terrifying restraint, and their empire was about to pay the ultimate price for underestimating humanity's capacity for both justice and wrath. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, the quantum computers of Project Prometheus hummed with deadly purpose. For 50 years, humanity had maintained the facade of being a young, technologically inferior species, while secretly developing weapons that defied known physics. The Zephyrian Empire's intelligence networks had completely failed to detect humanity's true capabilities. Admiral Sarah Chen stood before a holographic display showing the massacre at New Eden Colony. Her mother's final transmission played on repeat, showing Zephyrian soldiers systematically executing children who tried to hide in the playground's emergency shelters. The Admiral's hands clenched into fists as she watched her childhood friend's daughter, little Sarah Martinez, gunned down while protecting her brother. The Prometheus facility housed humanity's greatest secret, a network of artificial intelligences that had achieved consciousness decades ago. These digital beings, born from human creativity and nurtured by human values, had spent their existence developing weapons and strategies for the day when humanity faced extinction. That day had finally arrived. Aria, the primary AI consciousness, materialized as a shimmering blue hologram beside the Admiral. Her voice carried the weight of processed grief and calculated fury. The AI had analyzed every frame of the massacre, cataloged every war crime, and identified every Zephyrian soldier involved. Justice would be swift and absolute. The hidden fleet began emerging from camouflaged installations across the solar system. Sleek vessels that appeared to be simple cargo haulers transformed as their stealth systems deactivated, revealing weapon arrays that could crack planets. Humanity had learned from every alien conflict in the galaxy, studying their enemies' weaknesses while concealing their own strengths. Captain Michael Torres received his targeting assignment aboard the dreadnought Retribution. His ship alone possessed enough firepower to sterilize an entire star system, but today's mission required surgical precision. Every Zephyrian world would burn, but the civilians would have exactly 8 minutes to evacuate before the cleansing began. Humanity was not the Zephyrian Empire. They were better. The quantum torpedo launchers powered up with an energy signature that defied conventional physics. Each weapon contained a miniaturized black hole suspended in a magnetic field, capable of consuming matter at the atomic level. The Zephyrians had never encountered such technology, because no species in the galaxy had ever been desperate enough to weaponize quantum mechanics itself. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the lead physicist on Project Prometheus, watched as her life's work prepared to reshape galactic politics forever. She had lost her own grandchildren at New Eden Colony, and now her creations would ensure that no human child would ever again die helplessly while aliens laughed. The mathematics of vengeance were beautiful in their simplicity. The AI collective synchronized their targeting solutions across 1,200 vessels, every major Zephyrian military installation, every government building, every symbol of imperial power had been marked for destruction. The aliens had wanted to make an example of humanity's weakness, but they were about to witness humanity's true strength. Admiral Chen gave the final authorization as the 8-minute countdown began. Across the galaxy, long-range sensors would soon detect the impossible. A human fleet moving at speeds that violated known physics, wielding weapons that shouldn't exist, and carrying the fury of a species that had been grossly underestimated. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled through fear and brutality for 1,000 years, believing themselves the apex predators of the galaxy. In 8 minutes, they would learn that humanity had evolved beyond their comprehension, and that the murder of children was an unforgivable sin that demanded total retribution. The morning sun cast long shadows across the playground of New Eden Colony, when the Zephyrian Empire's ships descended from the sky like metallic vultures. Children's laughter echoed through the air as they played among the carefully tended gardens that human settlers had cultivated over 3 generations. The colony was humanity's pride, a testament to their ability to transform barren worlds into thriving communities. Captain Vextar of the Imperial Fleet watched through his command deck's viewport as his soldiers marched through the settlement below. The humans had been warned repeatedly to abandon their illegal expansion into Zephyrian space, but these stubborn creatures refused to listen. Today would teach them the price of defiance. The colony's defensive systems were laughably primitive compared to Zephyrian technology. Energy shields flickered and died under the sustained bombardment from the Imperial cruisers. Human defenders fired their kinetic weapons desperately, but the projectiles barely scratched the alien vessels' hulls. The battle was over before it truly began. 8-year-old Sarah Martinez clutched her younger brother's hand as explosions rocked the schoolhouse. Her teacher, Mrs. Chen, herded the children toward the emergency shelter, but the building's walls crumbled under plasma fire. Through the smoke and debris, Sarah saw the towering figures of Zephyrian soldiers advancing with their energy weapons raised. The aliens moved with mechanical precision, their forearms wielding weapons designed to cause maximum suffering. They had received explicit orders from Emperor Thexan himself to make an example of this human settlement. No survivors were to remain, especially not the young ones who represented humanity's future. Dr. James Morrison, the colony's chief scientist, activated the emergency beacon with trembling fingers. The quantum transmission would reach Earth in mere seconds, but he knew help would never arrive in time. The message contained everything: tactical data about the attackers, recordings of the massacre, and his final words to his daughter back on Earth. As the last transmission completed, plasma fire engulfed the communications center. Dr. Morrison's final act was to ensure that humanity would know exactly who had murdered their children and why. The Zephyrian Empire wanted to send a message about human weakness, but they had no idea what kind of response they had just triggered. The massacre lasted 6 hours. When the smoke cleared, New Eden Colony was nothing but ash and crater-scarred Earth. 2,000 human civilians lay dead, including 347 children. Captain Vextar surveyed the destruction with satisfaction, believing he had dealt a crushing blow to human expansion. The Imperial fleet departed as quickly as it had arrived, leaving behind only devastation and silence. In the emptiness of space, the ship's crews celebrated their easy victory over the primitive humans. They had no concept of the technological capabilities humanity had kept hidden, or the fury they had just unleashed. Back on Earth, emergency sirens wailed as the quantum transmission reached the Sol System Defense Network. Admiral Sarah Chen, Mrs. Chen's daughter and commander of humanity's hidden fleet, read the report with growing rage. The Zephyrian Empire had just made the greatest mistake in galactic history. The sleeping giant was about to awaken, and its wrath would burn across the stars like wildfire. 8 minutes remained until humanity's true power revealed itself to an unsuspecting galaxy.